I don't know if it's still morning. It is. Good morning. How are we doing this morning?
What do you think Drake did really well against, obviously, a lot of things, but really what stood out to you about his performance against App State?
Really the best thing about Drake May and the App State game, really, and I said this the week before too, but it got better, was the decision making. He was really, he graded out very high with regards to decision making on plays where he had different weapons to go to, different choices, different progressions in the passing game, pulled the ball when he needed to pull it, gave it when he needed to give it. He was really good on protection. So for a guy that's only been starting for 2 weeks, it tells me he's preparing the right way, and we're definitely practicing the right way. And so, Coach says all the time that transitions on game day, and it did. It translates on game day, and it did. So that was a big reason why we were able to maintain some consistency, and we had some continuity. And I think obviously he couldn't do the things that he did without the people around him, but it all starts with his decision making.
Are you at all surprised at how good he is so soon with live bullets at him after 2 games?
You're always hopeful. I think I'm not surprised because the guys that we have here, we had Sam before, and we've got Drake and Jacoby and Connor and a number of good quarterbacks here, and they're all athletically, they're capable of doing all the things that we need them to do. That's why we recruit them, because they have all the physical tools to make all the throws and run the ball and do all the things that we want them to do. It's whether or not they can learn the game at the speed of the game at this level, and then can it translate when they get out on the field. So the part of it that I never know is how is it going to translate on game day when the bullets are flying for real. The closest thing that we have are our scrimmages and spring ball and some really competitive areas of practice where we're putting them in some adverse situations to see how they play under pressure and how well they make decisions or don't make decisions. And so right now, the 3 guys that are 1, 2, and 3 here are making really good decisions. And I think it helped Ross to have the competition between these 2 guys because they had to be sharp on all fronts, to compete for the job to begin with. And so we got really good high execution from both of them. And I think Drake is benefiting from that, and so is the team right now.
Are there a couple of throws that he's made the last 2 games that when you see it in person and you go back and watch a film, you're like, wow, that's different level stuff?
Well, you get some of those throws in game time because of the adrenaline. I mean, he ripped a throw on a vertical to Bryson Nesbitt in the end zone to finish the 2-minute drive at the end of the first half. That was an impressive throw. Some of his ball placement stuff's been really good. So there's a couple of deep balls that we had that I think if you're not working on and schooled on how to throw the deep ball stuff, you just hang that ball up and you let the receiver go run for it. But we had 2 throws, particularly one on the left and one on the right. The first one was the opener to J.J. Jones, that it needs to be a 2-ball or a high laser shot, and it's got to be inside, and we'd like it to be a little bit higher. And he put both of them where they needed to be, and both of them were completes, and I think a lot of that had to do with ball placement. The receiver gets open, but then we've got to throw him open. And he did that on numerous throws. He also he missed a few. We caught some low ones. He had a wide open running back in the flat, and we threw it low, and it created us, we stumbled, and I think we got 1 yard. And there was a speed out with Kobe that was underthrown a little bit, and he made a great catch. We threw a comeback on the sideline that was a little low. JJ went down for it, made a great catch. That's just a give and take between those 2 positions. You'd like them all to be perfect. But the deep balls and some of the more precise throws really have to be good for us to have an opportunity to compete for them, and they were. And so, there wasn't much that there aren't many plays we'd like to have back with him on Saturday. There are a few, but there were fewer than the week before, and that's kind of the direction we'd like to be heading with him.
How pleased have you been overall with that 2-minute drill, even the FAMU game at the end of that first half?
Oh, you get what you emphasize, and I would credit Coach Brown with pushing us, me as a caller, as a play caller on a 2-minute scenario, and our offensive staff, and then the offense in general. We have run that drill every day since we started the regular season, and we did it an awful lot in summer camp. And The drill is good for us, and I think we take naturally to the drill because we're up-tempo to begin with. So it's not the tempo that we're getting used to. It's all the logistical things. It's all the strategic things that you do in that 1 minute or 2 minute scenario that is not the same as, a regular part of the game. So it paid dividends on Saturday, and I'm sure we'll keep doing it, and it'll hopefully keep paying dividends. But it was, it was a huge touchdown at the end of that drive to take the lead going into the half.
It seems like you've got a lot more options, I guess, and balance the way this offense is composed this year compared to last year. Do you agree with that, and how is that allowing you to call plays?
Well, more athletes makes you a better coach. I mean, that's just how it is. So we had seven different players, I think, score touchdowns in the game. I think we had 7 or 8 different people catch the football. I think we ran 4 running backs, if I remember correctly. We used all 3 of our tight ends. Drake sprayed the ball around, and it just forces you from a personnel standpoint to have to defend everybody, which makes it more difficult. And then schematically, we're trying to stretch the field pre-snap horizontally from sideline to sideline, and we're going to stretch it vertically post-snap, regardless of what we're running. So if we can make them defend all of the players and we can make them defend all of the field, it gives us the best opportunity to create some space and hopefully a big play.
Phil, in light of that, what was your takeaway not having Josh and the way the other receivers sort of in line with that played without the guy that everyone looks to?
Well, I mean, anytime you play without Josh Downs, it's not a good thing, right? Because he's such a playmaker. And then even when the ball is not being targeted or focused on towards Josh, he's usually attracting some sort of second defender, right? Whether it's truly not double coverage, whatever. But there's a second guy that knows that he's in the area and they're going to help with some zone support or something. And so what that does is it creates one-on-ones everywhere else. And now probably what we have going on now is we have some players that are proving that they can win in some one-on-one scenarios. And that bodes well for us. That's what you need. I think that's we lacked that at one wide receiver position last year. We're struggling to find another guy that they didn't feel like they could eliminate with just one defender. And that's where we want to go. I think it's hard to cover J.J. Jones in a one-on-one scenario. It's definitely hard to cover Gavo and a Gavin Blackwell in a one-on-one scenario. And then Kobe showed you what he can do from that position that Josh Downs kind of bases out of. So now we know we have more depth. We have more firepower at the receiver position. We already know about the depth in the backfield, and we're playing 3 tight ends. So I think what we need to do right now is focus in on preparing for each opponent and make sure we continue to play downhill up front like we did on Saturday and be physical and protect Drake the way we did Saturday. And it's going to come down to execution on Saturday. It's not going to be that we don't have the guys. We do have the players. And so we've got to have a good plan, and we've got to go execute it. And I thought the other thing, maybe the one disappointment in Saturday was the penalties. We had some pre-snap penalties that we can control. 4 of them were up on the offensive line. And so those are things that you got to emphasize and you got to eliminate, especially when you're playing against a good team like we were last week.
Seems like George Pedway is pretty special when he gets the ball, especially in space. I mean, thoughts on his performance, and is there an way to get him the ball a little more?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were talking about that today. I mean, George is very explosive. One of the issues, it's a good problem to have, but one of the problems that you have when you do have more players, when you do have more depth, is you've got to be creative and you've got to be, I think, intentional probably is the word with regards to getting some of these guys to football. You can only have a target list for so many guys, right? So last year it was Josh Downs and Sam Howell and whoever had a good week of practice. It was Antoine Green probably. This year it could be George, it could be Omarion, it could be DJ, it could be Caleb, it could be any one of these receivers now, and any one of the 3 tight ends. Obviously we use Bryson Nesbitt in a different way, but so you kind of look at that from a strategic standpoint, an X's and O's standpoint. What do they give up? How do we get our best players into those plays, into those areas, so that they get the touches that they need? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure the best ones, the most explosive ones, and George is certainly one of those guys, have enough touches to help us contribute to a win every Saturday.
You scored 63 points. This might be nitpicking, but did you go back and kind of reevaluate when you got the turnover, but that drive ended with the field goal as opposed to being able to score?
So you're talking about Drake's turnover? You
No,
know,
no, no. I'm talking
you're talking about when we got the
you
turnover?
ball. Yeah, and that drive ended with you guys kicking a field goal.
Yeah, you'd like to finish that with 7. There's no question. I think we had 6 points off of turnovers, I believe. And we wound up kicking 2 longer field goals instead of finishing those 2 drives. We had 12 total drives. We scored on 9 of them. 7 of them were touchdowns. 2 of them were field goals. You always want those field goal drives to be. What I was happy about, those field goals didn't come in the red zone. So we were 4 for 4 in the red zone where we wanted to be. And yeah, you do. You look at those plays on the field goal drives to see where we could have executed better. Could I have called something better? I called a run play down in an area on their side of the field that we know they heated up a little bit. And we had an answer for the pressure. But I probably could have made Drake's job a little bit easier there had I called something different, a protected run or, a quick hit or something in that area. So you look at the play calling, you look at our execution, you look at mistakes that are made on the negative plays. We evaluate sacks and TFLs every week just to make sure that we understand why they're happening. We were listed for 3 sacks this week, but one of them was on Drake May. We pulled on an RPO that was never there, and that's going to be a sack. You can't pull an RPO unless it's open. And so we did that one time, and that was really one of the sacks. The O-line had 1 sack this week, and then a tight end gave up a sack. So, the 3 get credited to the O-line, but really when you break it down and you look at it, Drake is responsible for 1, a tight end was, and then the O-line gave up 1 this week. So those are the parts of the game that you don't see until you you sit down in the office and you pull the film up and you evaluate what really happened.
And what would you attribute the success in the red zone so far to?
But truthfully, I honestly think that we're playing physical up front. You can do some things play calling wise in the open field to help protect your O-line. I think it's hard to do that on short yardage. It's hard to protect them on the goal line, and it's hard to protect them in the red zone. And at the end of the day, in short yardage football and goal line football and in red zone football, regardless of the X's and O's and whether we run or throw, the ability to be able to run down there is huge. And then there's a physicality piece to pass protecting too. It's not just run game. So we're getting some good production there right now at that position, and it's helping us in some of the situational areas without question.
Phil, when we're talking about the different mouths to feed on offense,
Sure.
Getting guys the ball and stuff, is one of the fun things or positive things is that they each, in terms of running back, bring so many different skills to the table. Petaway speed, Omarion and Caleb's power. Is that like just kind of a neat thing for you to have as a play caller?
Well, it's like having toys. I mean, you want to use them the right way, but there's another aspect to it too. It's the depth that gives you some weaponry in terms of you've got one running back out there and he's hitting on all cylinders and he's gaining yardage and he's breaking tackles and he's securing the ball, and you have another one out there who might have rushed for 150 yards the week before, and he's just not off to as good a start. So you can roll with the hot guy when you have some depth, and then it also breeds competition, so that when running back number 2 or 3 or 4, and I don't mean on the depth chart, but just into the game and from an order standpoint, when they get out there, they want to perform because they know that in order to stay out there, they've got to produce. And I say this in just about every offensive team meeting that we have. At the end of the day, it really comes down to character and production, and there's really nothing else that's important. We got to be good people on and off the field, and we got to handle ourselves the right way. And the character piece, it lends to their preparation and how they treat their teammates and how they lead and do all of those things on that end of being a ball player. And then on the other end, it's production. There are kids that have played here that didn't play a lot in the past that I love and that could babysit my kids that I just will have relationships with for years, but their production was low, and so you have to make a decision with regards to what's best for your team, and that is putting out the most productive people. And then I think Coach Brown would agree with this entirely, is you have a guy that's extremely productive, but is not handling himself in a high character way. He's not going to play either, right? So you got to handle yourself from a teammate standpoint the right way, and that's what's so great about this program is it's a high character locker room. So we've got a lot of continuity, even between the O and the D in our locker room. You know, and then so it really becomes only about production because we've got a high character team. So then you go out there and you practice hard and you play, and the guys that are producing are the guys that play more. It's really, it's a lot simpler than people make it out to be sometimes.
Can you maybe just give us some idea of what goes into what you all are using to determine a starter at running back? Obviously, you went DJ in the opener and then Omarion against App. Obviously, Omarion had a great game against FAMU, and then didn't have as big of a game in Boone. But like, just what are your the pieces you're using to determine a starter just at that position?
Well, it is a little bit of a dance when you have 4 of them. And, you know, Coach Porter and I talk about it weekly, and we were discussing it this morning before I came down. You have guys with different strengths, so you try to play to their strengths. You have guys that are more reliable mentally than some others because they're veterans and the others are younger guys, so you want to play them at the right time. And I think all 4 of our guys made plays on Saturday, and Coach Porter does a good job of rolling through them. If I need one for a specific play and I know, I'll call him. If I don't need a specific one, then he's handling the rotation with those guys so that we can, one, keep them fresh. He's going with the hot guy. You know, Caleb had a fumble that went out of bounds last week, but, you know, that's concerning, right? So his reps kind of diminished a little bit, and we went with the guys that were securing it. And that's certainly not an attack on Caleb. He had a great game on Saturday. You know, he busted one wide open on a power play that took us down to inside the 5-yard line. So he did a great job Saturday. Those are the variables that kind of dictate. It's the production, it's what is the need and what is their strength, you know, and then who has the hot hand. And I don't know if that makeup or that approach will change here. That's kind of how we handle it at every position. Yeah.
Georgia State played a Power 5 team with a talented quarterback that night. What did you see on the field from their defense?
Defensively, there's some players there that we are concerned with because of how productive they are. 34 is an outstanding safety. You know, and to look at him, he's not 6'4" and 220 pounds or anything, but so size is not his deal, but he will hit you like he's that size. And he's physical and he can cover ground and he's really athletic and he does a good job in the open field. Now 98's a very, very good defensive lineman. I believe it's 54 is a really good defensive lineman in the nose. Number 9 is a player. He's playing that bandit position, which is ironically the same number in the same position that we saw at App State last week. There are some similarities between the App State defense and the Georgia State defense. I think the DC at Georgia State does a few different things out of the same base defense than App does, but there is a lot of overlap this week, which can be a benefit because we're not seeing something that's completely new and drastically different from what we've had in the past. But sometimes I think maybe, hey, we had a lot of success with this last week and it's just going to go that well this week. It's going to be different because the players are different and the strengths are different. So schematically, a lot of overlap from a personnel standpoint, I think very, very different than App State. And those guys particularly that I mentioned are the ones that stand out right now and from a day and a half of watching film.
All right, gang.
Okay, y'all have a good one.
Thanks, Phil.
All right, thanks, Phil.
Thank you, Phil. Good stuff. Appreciate it.
18 with Phil.
Hey guys and ladies.
Nice team.
Good.
You guys ready for that?
Sure they have no questions, so.
That's what they said. They don't run.
So where does it begin when you look back at the game? There were some issues in the first quarter, then things went well, then everything kind of fell apart before.
Yeah, it did.
Where does it start with you?
Well, as you go back and look at it, earlier in the game, we gave up a couple of explosive plays, right? One pass, 41-yard pass, and then we gave up a long touchdown run. Then I think we kind of settled in and started to play better probably midway through the second quarter, all the way through the third quarter. And we settled down. We kind of had an idea of what they were doing. I thought we fit the run well. We weren't giving up any explosive plays. We were getting off the field. And then the fourth quarter, at that point, I think we had given up 21 points And then the fourth quarter was an implosion, and it was a lot of things. And it was not on a single individual. It wasn't on a single group of players, D-line, linebackers, secondary. It was everybody. And usually when those scenarios happen, it's poor execution. And then, you throw on top of that, we had several opportunities to get off the field, and then we had penalties. And, I think special teams did a good job of giving us long fields where they had to drive the ball. There was times where we were getting ahead of the chains, and then we'd get a penalty. So the fourth quarter was a mixture of a lot of things. Some of it was great execution by them. Some of the throws they made in the fourth quarter were, right where the ball had to be. But we have to be better in the coverage element. And when we have opportunities to get off the field, we got to be able to get off the field. And those penalties, they aided 3 or 4 different drives that ended up turning into points. So there's a lot of good that can come from this. Obviously, it was a performance that we wish in the fourth quarter hadn't happened. But there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of teaching. We have to tackle better on top of that as well. I feel like we missed a lot of tackles we shouldn't have. I think that was evident pretty much through most of the game. But I think we can get better at that. And, overall, just the penalties, the tackling, the misexecution of some coverage elements. All of those things, it was a perfect storm, and it'll be a learning experience for our whole defense.
Gene, there's a lot of times when you start a season, you have an idea of what you're working with, but until they actually play games, you're not entirely sure. Has that been a surprise in terms of what you thought you were working with versus how they're responding on the field? Has there been a huge gap with that part, I guess?
Well, let me say this. Through times of chaos, which we've obviously had that, we certainly had it Saturday, the players have responded amazing with just kind of their demeanor on the field, not really panicking when things weren't going well. So in that regard, that's been good. But, everything is a feel thing. Everything, the first couple of games with any new staff, there's a feel thing on, how we're going to call the game. We're learning about our players as we go. Sure, there's always that learning curve, right? So we always want to, we're looking at different people. We're trying to play more people. We feel like that's imperative, that we can play more people. But it's a process where we're learning each other. So there's no question about that.
Coach, 2 questions. First, have you ever given up 40 points in a single quarter in your coaching career?
Never.
The second question, from the point of 10 points being scored in the fourth quarter to 20, then to 30, did the message change at all from what you were telling your guys in huddles before plays started to try and motivate them differently, to try and get them to do something differently?
In those scenarios, you're trying to stay calm and you're trying to, obviously you're always motivating your guys, right? Those conversations in those scenarios happen on the sideline between series, obviously. And that was kind of back to my other point of that when we have those conversations with those guys, and we've always talked about being able to weather the storm and the chaos, that's when those conversations take place, right? So when they come off the field, it's more of what are they doing? What do we need to do to correct it? What do we need to do to change it? And then also being able to, make sure that their mindset is right. And it was. And again, we have to do a better job coaching. So this is all of us, starting with me, doing a better job coaching. And we know there's issues that we got to fix. That's obvious. But there's definitely a fine line between knowing what you got to fix and panicking. And I'll never be a panicker. There's certainly urgency, and our players know that. We talked about it yesterday. We went through the film together, pointed out all the things that were wrong, and they've been awesome. So they just have to keep working. We have to keep working as coaches to put our guys in a better chance to succeed. But the message is great. And to be honest with you, with the game on the line, when things weren't going well, Noah and Kamen Rucker made a great play at the end to win the game. So There, amongst all of the negatives that were out there, which there were plenty, we also have to pull the positives from several different parts of the game where they played well. And I think the message is inconsistency. Like, do you want to be the defense that played, midway through the second quarter and all of the third, or do we want to be the other? And if we don't want to be the other, why were we the other? And that was the message yesterday, but it was well received. And again, I expect us to be better this week.
So then do you think that this game, when you go back and look at it and the week before, do you think it was more so a lack of preparation or a lack of execution in the game that you can attribute the problems of the defense?
Yeah, again, I think anytime you're not playing well, it's always a matter of execution, right? But that kind of goes back to my original statement. We have to do a better job of preparing our guys. We have to do a better job with putting them in the right positions. And we all have to get better together. It's that simple.
How do you defend the zone blocking scheme that App State did? How do you look at that tape, the stretch zone blocking schemes in it?
Yeah, it's tough.
Counteract it better.
Yeah, it's tough. The tough part about it is they'll cut down your backside of your defense. So obviously it's about staying alive and people, 11 guys staying alive. And then you're going to get some scenarios where they're going to get you in open space, whether it's a safety, whether it's a corner. But the second and third levels of your defense, when the ball gets to that point, we have to tackle better. But the genesis, the beginning of that, is making sure that it doesn't get to the second and third levels, to the third levels, as much as it did Saturday. And so we have to do a better job in the front seven of controlling that. But it's a tough play to defend. They ran it well, and at times we stopped it really well, and at times we didn't. So, again, I think that kind of goes back to the message of the inconsistencies of our defense that showed up.
In the secondary, sorry, AJ, in the secondary, is the corners not playing the ball? Is it not jamming? What's the issues with the secondary where they're getting open, I guess, back-to-back games now and dicing off a little bit back there?
Yeah, I think we can get better. We talked about it yesterday. I think our technique can get better in the secondary. That's for everybody, not just the corners, but the safeties as well. There were some balls thrown Saturday that we could have defended better, for sure. Usually when you are in press coverage, if you lose the battle, it's in the first 5 yards or the last 5 yards, or both. And so what we have to get better at as a secondary just in general is when we are in press coverage, we got to win at the line of scrimmage. That's the beginning of it, right? So the first 5 yards always matter. And sometimes our technique wasn't as good as it needed to be, so we lost at the line of scrimmage, and then typically when that happens, you're trying to play catch-up down the field. And so, again, it goes back to getting better at fundamentals, getting better at executing different coverages, and we're all responsible for that.
When so many things don't go right, what is one thing that if you get it fixed, it will have a significant effect on the other things not going as poorly as they did?
Well, I don't think there's one thing. I think there's a couple things that you have to focus on here, right? Number one is the execution of technique. And that's at every position, right? So we talk about the run game. Sometimes the defensive line gets cut down, or sometimes the linebacker misfits. The ball's running on the secondary. If you're talking about the pass game, sometimes it's lack of pass rush. Sometimes it's a DB losing at the line of scrimmage. And then, so you have to look at missed tackles. And then you have to look at the opportunities, where we, had opportunities to get off the field. And, we've got these penalties, that keep us on the field. And, we tell them, we keep track of these in practice. If you're doing it in practice, it's going to happen in the game. So they just have to understand that, in critical times in games, the execution has to be flawless, or you end up playing hard on third and fourth down, and you're back out there you're out there for another series, simply because, we ended up getting penalties. So not trying to run around the question, but there's not one thing that needs to happen. There's several things that need to happen that we need to continue to improve on.
Is there something that you said to Drake or Phil after the game, kind of saying, hey, thanks for scoring so many points, thanks for giving us so much room to work with?
A huge thank you and a huge hug, maybe even a kiss in there somewhere. No, no, the offense has been amazing. They've been amazing, and obviously they're really giving us a chance to try to fix some issues, and it's been really fun to watch them. They've done a great job, but yeah, you think there's a couple thank yous after the game? Yeah, for sure.
Gene, you've had a lot of experience in your career doing a lot of different things. 7 years ago, you came here and inherited a defense that was the worst in the country, and things went well. You got things going. Is there any parallel here or any experience from that you can recall that can help you when dealing with a group that maybe has some confidence shaken a little bit?
You know, guys, I've done this a long time, so I've been through a lot of scenarios, right? I've been through a lot of firsts. Saturday was probably another first in my career, just kind of the way the fourth quarter went. And, you know, as long as I'm leading this defense, we're going to do it one way. Every day is going to be about consistency. The message is going to be about consistency. The urgency obviously is always ramping up, right, especially when you're not playing well. But one thing that I won't do is I won't come in after a great win and be one way and then come in after a disappointing day and be another way. I've been doing it too long. So I know what goes with this. I know what issues are out there. I know what we have to fix. I have a lot of confidence in our guys still being all in without question. I don't think there's any question right now. And particularly when you have, you know, scenarios like this where you can literally show them together as a group, this is what happens, and this is always a game of inches, right? So, you know, if a safety's off just a yard or two, or a linebacker's, you know, over in a gap, you know, 1.5 feet away, those things matter. And so we'll continue to give them a consistent message. We as coaches, me and everybody on defense, we have to up our game. We know after 2 games, we know our guys, we're learning our guys, we're learning what they can do, what they can adjust to, and that is an adjustment period. But, you know, for me, I've just been through too much, and I mean, I hope there's not another first, but if there is, we'll deal with that too. So, but our kids have been phenomenal, and I will say this. When you look at all of this and, you know, you break it down, you always say, okay, how are they going to respond? Yesterday's practice was awesome. The meetings were awesome. We just got to get it fixed. So we're not going to panic, but there is a huge sense of urgency.
When you look at practice this week and trying to fix some issues or fix bad habits from players, work on tackling
Yes.
or get off blocks, what's the process to do that in season to fix some of the little things that can obviously make a big difference on plays and stuff?
Yeah. Number one, it's the standard of how you practice. And that's one of the things that I think that we've really tried to do. I feel like our practices have gone well. And I think that trying to fix issues in practice, you got to give them as much game speed scenarios as you can. We do a lot of in-season, you know, against the offense. And the means behind the madness for that is that we get good on, you know, the best on the best of blocking, of tackling, things of that nature. And we need to do that. So within that structure, within the structure of our individual time and how we're individually coaching our guys and working on the skill sets that we need to develop, we need to do a better job of that. So in season, yeah, it's you know, you got to work on the opponent. You know, Georgia State does a lot of things. They run the ball really, really well. And so we got our hands full there. But in the same sense, we have to get better at the little issues that you know, popped up Saturday.
Gene, are you guys still doing any live tackling since the regular season started, or is it all the thud?
Yeah, it's all the thud. You know, it's hard to do that during the season. So really that comes down to, you know, working tackling, you know, tackling circuits, tackling particularly in open space. But, you know, again, then it's also about in practice constricting spaces too, right? So that, you know, there were several times Saturday that, people would look at a missed tackle and say, wow, that guy missed that tackle, but that wasn't the beginning of the problem. The beginning of the problem is you got guys that are running up the field and making these lanes to run in, much greater than they need to be. So it's not always just the product of a guy missing a tackle. A lot of times it's a product of the front making it more difficult to make those tackles because we're not doing some things right. So, but to your point, it's hard to tackle during the season. I'm not sure anybody does that.
Jen, what do you need to see from the defensive line that maybe they lost track of during Saturday?
Well, I think, playing with great pad level, we've been saying that since day one, right? Staying on their feet, staying alive, holding their gaps, and, even when we have movement up in the front, making sure that we're, if the gap moves, we're redirecting back in the gaps. If you don't do that, then you have two in a gap, and that's where you have a single point failure in the run game if two guys are in the same gap. So, but they just need to continue to, work on pad level, playing physically and striking blocks, and staying in their gaps with movement.
Coach, I wanted to ask, what are some of the specific positives that you can take away from the second and third quarter play from Saturday?
It was execution. And we were literally able to show them, look, like, here's the call, watch us execute this. Whether it was pass coverage, whether it was pass rush, whether it was the run game. And as you go back and look, which I didn't say, there's many times right now when we got some explosive plays hit on us, and 10 guys are playing it perfect, and one guy's out of position, whether he lost that battle, somewhere in the play, but one guy's out of position. We could play great coverage, and then I got to give them credit. Some of their throws were amazing throws and catches. They did a good job with that. They got the ball out a couple times in 2 seconds, and we were there. We were in coverage, and it was a great throw and a great catch. So some of that happened too. That's not an excuse. That's just facts. So it was a perfect storm, but there was, in the second and the third quarter, like you said, like you asked, when we executed, we were good. When we were focused and locked in, we were good. And, this is about focusing for 60 minutes. So we get up by 17 points or whatever it was. We just got a turnover. Everything was good. And I think we lost focus. I think that, at that point it was, human nature is to say, okay, we got this. And we didn't have it. And I think that's part of the problem too, is making sure that our guys understand how important it is to focus for the entire 60 minutes. Because I don't feel like we did that as a group Saturday. And we talked about that yesterday.
Building on that, go ahead, Adam.
Thank you. When you are going back and looking at it, just wanted to ask you about your process. So Saturday, were you popping in the tape on the bus on the way back? You say, I'm just going to get away from this and start off Sunday morning, by doing that, or you...
I wanted to get away from it, but I can't. I'm on the bus.
What's the approach you take with it? Are you taking notes and stuff? Or are you just watching it and taking mental notes?
Yeah.
How do you go through sorting out all that?
So we had a bus ride home. So we always typically watch the game right afterwards. So we watched it. I watched it on the bus. All the assistant coaches watch it on the bus. You take all your notes. You look at it. So I actually watched it 2 times that night before I went to bed. Got up the next morning, watched it again, had all of our notes. We met together as a group and looked at all of the things that when it didn't go right, why, obviously, and really dove into those, and then took that and then had a team meeting with our players and basically talked through all of that. And that's the process.
On a positive note, building off the answer to the second, third quarter, were there some players that stood out you thought did well, did some good things? I know you mentioned Taylor and Ruck the Butcher.
What'd you call him?
Yeah, I think his nickname's came in Ruck the Butcher. Okay. Any other positive?
That's good.
players?
That's good. I'll call him that. I'll tell you who really, really played hard and well was Des Evans. I was really proud of Des. I thought he tried to play violent He played so hard the entire day. I was really, really proud of his effort. I think Cam Kelly took some steps in the right direction as a player. I think he's getting better. Cedric Gray, obviously, I mean, he played a lot of snaps, and you talk about playing your guts out now. I mean, he played his guts out. And I hesitate to name names because so many other guys did too, but those guys pretty much jumped out on the film.
All right, you guys good?
You good?
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
guys.
Thank you,
Appreciate it. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the time.